We lost one, Michael. We
No,
lost them.
no.
Welcome to issue 17 of Comic Cast Video. Jong Lee here.
Hey, with Michael Carroll.
Thank you guys for joining us, and you can follow us on social media. I'm on Twitter. I'm at One Punch.
I'm at producer Mike 975.
And today, what we're going to be talking about is, I guess you could play a little bit of dust in the wind for DC Comics and Universe. It's a sad day. It's a sad day. Late Monday, I guess you would say, is when all of this announcements start happening. And then Tuesday, we got more news. The Hollywood Reporter is writing stories up the wazoo about layoffs, but it's the big overall arcing theme, it seems to me, is that they're pushing more for streaming service. They're trying to get. It sucks because I'm a big proponent of DC Comics. I grew up loving reading DC Comics. Love their animation. The Batman series is quite possibly my favorite animated superhero series of all time, and I think that's a lot of people feel that way too. I grew up watching Smallville. I grew up watching Lois and Clark, the cheesiness of Lois and Clark. I grew up watching all of that. I grew up on Michael Keaton's Batman. I was a little kid, and like all of this stuff. Even a couple years ago, I was watching The Flash. I gave up a lot of those shows. And so it has a very soft spot in my heart. It really does, and it's right now I don't think I have like, oh, Marvel over DC or DC over Marvel. I don't think that way. I just want the best content. But growing up, I was a DC guy. I thought DC made better comics. I thought DC made better villains and superheroes. I mean, of course, that was biased of me because I grew up reading all that stuff, and I also grew up watching Spider-Man and X-Men and all that stuff. But man, this is that little kid in me is like dying because they're essentially laid off they're retaining only a third of their comic staff. Their editorial ranks are basically whittled down. Jim Lee, who's one of the biggest names in comics, got stripped of any editorial power, and he still remains the CCO, but it's just like you're basically castrating the man. You're wiping off DC Comics and essentially killing off DC Universe. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it is a sad day for. I mean, I think even if you're not a fan of DC, like it's just a sad day.
Well, it's just a sad day in general because it was around, I think, 600 layoffs in total for at least. And one article described it as just the first wave. So it's in the middle of a pandemic when employment is already bad as it is. It sucks to have, all this cost cutting, I guess, if you will. But people losing their jobs in the middle of a pandemic is terrible. It sucks. It's I don't know what a lot of these folks will do. I'm sure all of them are talented, but where do they go? What do they do? I don't know. It sucks, man. It's never easy when you lose your job, especially in this way.
Yeah, and the big key layoffs for DC, they're losing their editor-in-chief Bob Harris, their senior VP of Publishing Strategy and Support Services Hank Cannells, VP of Marketing and Creative Services in Jonah Weiland, VP Global Publishing Initiatives and Digital Strategy Bobby Chase, Senior Story Editor Brian Cunningham, and Executive Editor Mark Doyle, who oversaw the rollout of Black Label graphic novels, which, I mean, essentially a lot of this stuff is going to die along with them. DC Universe as well. Like you said, it's never easy when you have all these layoffs, but they are condensing a lot of the roles. They're giving more power to other people here and there, but I guess we'll start off with DC Universe. When it first launched, me and you kind of looked at each other and were like, is this a good idea? Because when you look at all the streaming services that were out there, and when DC Universe first started, you saw CBS All Access get started. You had all of these smaller networks start streaming services, and then they were like, oh, let's roll out a DC streaming service that has comic book content, and you can watch these shows. And at first we were like, okay, it's not a bad idea. Some of these shows are decent. Harley Quinn is amazing. A lot of people claim that Doom Patrol is amazing, but to pay, I guess the streaming service wasn't too bad in terms of price, but I mean, I'm a comic book lover, but you take a step back, you look at the general population. What would you say the general population in terms of like comic book readers there are? They're probably, in terms of a general population, you're probably not looking at more than 5% maybe, and I feel like that's generous. And so when you start DC streaming service, you're kind of like, man, what are they doing? Like, and then and then it seemed like not even a year later, probably not even a year later, they go, oh yeah, we're gonna do HBO Max, and then now you're almost cannibalizing your audience, and you're just like, this is almost a misstep and a correcting of a mistake that they made, where you could have included all your DC streaming service and your DC Comics with HBO Max later. So it seems like they're kind of overcorrecting here.
Plus, we also know like Doom Patrol is on HBO Max, Harley Quinn is on HBO Max. They moved Stargirl off of DC Universe to CW. So it's like they keep doing these things where it's like, why would I have DC Universe if I can just have HBO Max at this point? Unless I'm a super, super fan of DC Comics and everything. But at this point, I mean, it seems like they're putting the focus on HBO Max, which is fine. That's understandable. But it's going to come at the cost of a lot of people and a lot of jobs with DC Universe. I think we're seeing the beginning of the end, because I don't know if you said it, but a good portion of the staff there got laid off as well. So we don't know exact numbers or anything, but it's a tough situation. But why, like you said, why have this second app that also shows DC shows, and why not just have your DC content on HBO Max and maybe keep DC Universe but flip it into something like Marvel Unlimited, where it's just a comic book app? I mean, something to maybe where you don't lose all those subscribers that you do have, whatever amount you do have with it. At least don't lose that group and maybe just focus on comics.
I know it may sound disingenuous when you come out and say this is a restructuring more than anything, but it's a correct term, I would say. You are technically restructuring the company to make it more profitable in the long run. You take this hit now, and it's not going to be a popular opinion, and new CEO Jason Killer is not going to he's not going to be a very popular person, obviously now. But he's not incorrect when he says restructuring. I mean, they are restructuring to focus mostly on streaming on HBO Max and the millions of dollars that they poured into it. And I can't imagine that DC Universe was cheap either. You had to have a lot of people creating the site and people to have it run properly. So you would probably guess that they've spent a couple $1 million on that service and putting everything on there. So like it's in the pandemic, obviously doesn't help. And so this could have happened maybe 2-3 years down the road, and just the pandemic kind of sped up everything. And I think I read something that they lost millions of dollars in the hundreds. So it sucks, and people losing their jobs, it sucks. A lot of them probably will find jobs again, maybe not until companies kind of kick back up the hiring phase again because of COVID. But man, it's a sad day. It's a very, very sad day.
Well, and it's also, we have to take into account that it is Warner and AT&T is involved in this as well. And apparently AT&T recently detailed a roughly $830 million hit to second quarter earnings. Yeah. So it's like plus they're merging. So in a merger, you're going to have, as it was put in some of the articles, redundancies in terms of staff. So that's the typical. We went through that when we were at 97.5 together, and Gow Media came through and acquired 97.5. Once a new company comes in, they look at what redundancies they have, and they trim it down. that's part of it. But then also, obviously, the pandemic does not help in this situation at all.
Mm-mm.
But if they are focusing more on direct to consumer content, it would make sense to try and put the focus on HBO Max, put all your eggs in that basket in terms of trying to get that thing to where it should be. Because I was reading they have 30 million HBO subscribers, linear, like I guess cable subscribers, but of that, I think it was only like a million or something like that, like activated their HBO Max like access or account or whatever. Like they still have a lot of work to do in terms of rolling out HBO Max because it wasn't a perfect rollout.
Mm-mm.
I think there was a lot of confusion when it came to HBO Max, HBO Now, HBO Go. They still aren't on Roku. They still aren't on was it Amazon? I believe like there's still some issues there that need to be worked out, and it so again it makes sense to like we really need to focus and get the streaming service off the ground.
Yeah, and they have. And this is one thing that's a little disingenuous. They have this number of subscribers, right? They have. What's crazy? I have the exact number. They have about 30 million HBO subscribers to the service, and like you said, 1.1 million
Mm-hmm.
activated it, and 3 million retail customers in the first month, which means that a lot of the other subscribers to your service have like AT&T phone service that have that option of built into to getting the HBO Max subscription. So it's not like you're getting new subscribers, right? So
Yeah.
that part of it, I feel like, is very disingenuous. Where you're like, oh, we have all of these subscriber numbers. Look at these great numbers that we did in the first quarter. Yeah, you did. The numbers are there, but you didn't get them like organically. You got them because a lot of them were your basic, not basic because you have to have a certain plan on HBO. I mean, not HBO, AT&T um, wireless in terms of your cell phone and stuff like that. Your subscription has to be there. So you're based on your plan. You get HBO Max for free for I think a year, and so a lot of them don't, like 1.1 million only activated their HBO service. So it's just like you're kind of falsifying your numbers a little bit. Technically, it's true, but they're not actively on it. Now, I use it for a couple of shows. I switched over. I watch Harley Quinn on there now, and I watch John Oliver, and that's about it. So I mean, it would be nice if their streaming service had live programming on for the amount of money that you're paying. Let's say you wanted to watch something on TNT, but you wanted to watch a live version. There should be a live version available for you. Same with True TV and every other channel that they have on there. So there's a lot of bugs that they need to be fixed. They're hopefully they take this time to fix it, and maybe down the line we get a resurgence in DC Comics, and because it's essentially dead. You have just a couple of people running it over there, and I haven't even mentioned their merchandising. They essentially killed all their merchandising. So
Yeah, DC Collectibles. Yeah,
yes, the
they've shuttered
collectibles.
that. Yeah,
So it's just like it sucks. We kind of and maybe we should be a little surprised that it lasted this long because, I mean, I don't know. Like the business model, I guess, wasn't necessarily smart in terms of like the overreaching that they did with everything that they wanted to do, and maybe we should have saw this coming a lot sooner.
and maybe now it's going to be a more unified vision. And that again, this often described as refocusing and restructuring. Maybe there's a more unified division, so we don't have multiple apps that basically do the same thing all at once. So I wonder the future though of DC Comics because I feel like they've been doing like the Black Label stuff has been, I think, by all accounts, been doing pretty well and getting good response from people. So for people that are in the middle of those stories, what's going to happen for the fans of those current runs that what's happening to that? I mean, there's a lot of questions to be had. I I would hope I hope that they find a way to bounce back, obviously, because honestly, we wouldn't have a lot of the products like in terms of watching the movies and everything without the comics.
Hmm.
Like that's the foundation of a lot of what we have right now,
Mm-hmm.
both in Marvel and in DC. So I really hope we don't lose any more in terms of the comic aspect.
One quick thing before we go. Do you think that it's going to DC 5, 10 years from now is going to look more like Marvel and Marvel Studios and Disney? Meaning that essentially Marvel Comics is it's kind of dead. It's DC. I mean, not that DC Comics was flourishing, but it was, DC had a more active role with their comics and their animated series and everything like that. Even their TV shows. But now Marvel's kind of putting more eggs in the basket of making better TV for their streaming service for Disney Plus and making them more like movies. Do you see DC kind of DC, Warner Brothers, AT&T in general going down that road?
I mean, in a way, they kind of are with like all the stuff that they've been putting together. Like I feel like it's kind of, I don't know that they'll go to the same exact model necessarily. Where like Kevin Feige's obviously over a lot of that Marvel property type stuff. I don't know if they would do the exact same model, but I feel like they're going to lean heavily into a lot of those IPs to try and get people to that streaming service. That's why, again, Zack Snyder's thing is such a big deal to that HBO Max. They're going to really push that hard because I imagine that's going to bring in a lot of subscribers, especially right from the jump. Um, I, I think there will be some mimicking, if you will, but it won't be a complete one-to-one copy. One other thing I did want to point out too, we talked about it weeks ago. I don't know if we talked about it on the video version, but we did talk about it on the audio version. It seems like WB Games, like the interactive division, based off what they've said, it doesn't seem like they're going to try and sell that now. Like that group seems to be part of their thing about direct-to-consumer content, interactive content, gaming focused. So it seems like NetherRealm, Monolith, all the other studios that are part of that, WB Montreal, are still going to be within WB for the near future.
Yeah, I mean that's a good sign. I mean, I think video games. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would assume the video games are a lot more profitable than comic books.
They're one of the biggest. Yeah, I mean, video games are a
It's a
huge,
huge industry.
huge industry, huge revenue stream. So, and their group right now, they have one of the better groups,
Hmm.
and obviously they're making a point of that with Rocksteady's game that they just announced. I real quick, I know we're supposed to wrap up, but I just wanted to ask you: doesn't this put a damper on this DC fandom event that's coming up next
Right,
week?
right.
It's like a dark cloud now.
Now, I don't know why they chose to do this now. Maybe they wanted to. Maybe they thought, oh, maybe a week later the DC fandom is going to overshadow and drown out everything that happened with the layoffs. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case. It's almost like a Friday news dump with sports and anything, right?
Right.
Where you dump all your bad stuff on Friday. Hopefully, you take the weekend and you wait for your talk shows to come back on Monday. But I mean, it's not the case. Social media has kind of made it to a point where if it's big enough, it'll get pushed through the weekend through social media, and then on that Monday, you'll get bombarded with talk radio through the entire week if it's big enough. And I feel like they do it, nine as is of this video release, 9 days before your DC fandom, and you're kind of like, I guess they give enough cushion to when the DC fandom happens and all this big news comes up, you're kind of overlooking that stuff that happened. But I can't imagine if there were people that are on top of this when DC fandom happens, that they have the enough courage to ask some of these bigger people, hey, what were your thoughts on the layoffs? Like, it's like it seems like that you made this decision now because you wanted to save face, and then you would hope that DC fandom covered a lot of the stuff up. I hope we get some answers to a lot of that stuff, other than the quotes that we see in the Hollywood Reporter.
Like when I watch fandom or whatever, and they make a big point of DC Universe, in the back of my mind, I'm like, that thing's not gonna last.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna have that in the back of my mind. Like, DC Comics was obviously going to be a big part of the event as well, and it's like, oh, man, but what? How much are we getting? I don't know. It's just I feel like it's a bad taste that we're going to be having.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was supposed to be just a great, like, everything. I've seen tons of marketing on Instagram and everything for this event. Like, it's all happy go lucky, and then this comes through, and it's just, man, that put a damper on things.
Yeah, and if you're killing DC Universe, what about I guess there's not going to be any shows on there. They're all going to move, so that's kind of a moot point. But yeah, it's definitely a damper on things. We were going to talk about this video was supposed to be about our favorite
Oh,
X-Men, top five X-Men of all time, and we're going to have fun with it. We wanted you guys to join in on it, but this kind of overshadows everything, and so maybe we do that sometime down the road. But today we wanted to talk about this DC Warner Brothers AT&T news, and one source says that when the merger happened, that this was kind of the writing was on the wall, like this something big like this was going to happen, and I guess to the source, your I guess prediction kind of came to fruition,
yeah.
right? So. Well, let us know what you guys think about it. Leave a comment below. Are you guys going to be out on DC everything? Are you sad that the comic books are going to essentially kind of go away? DC Universe is essentially dead. Will you be supporting HBO Max? There's a lot of questions out there that we want you guys to be a part of. So leave a comment below. And if you haven't, please hit subscribe.
Slap the bell. Do it like that. Just hit it.
Ding, ding, ding. Yes, just hit it. Just click it. And there's a bell next to it, the real actual bell, that if when we post new video that you'll get emailed saying, hey, you guys got new video from Comic Cast Video.
Yeah, so hit it. Don't quit it.
And you can find all our audio podcasts on every major podcast platform. It's at Comic Cast, and you can follow us on Twitter. I'm at One Punch.
I'm at Producer Mike 975.
And unlike DC Universe, we will be seeing you guys soon.
Too soon. Oh.
It's not actually came out. Okay.